means working with your board of directors to carry out the policies and procedures set forth by that board of directors. That board of directors of your association is governed by your documents, as we talked about earlier today. So it's very important to decide, again, when you're self-managed, who is going to enforce those documents. When you're managed by a management company, we're of course going to enforce those documents on behalf of the board of directors.
Well, okay, so he's being sort of political about it. Look, if you, I'm just going to lay it on the table. If you're self-managed, there's a lot of responsibility and accountability that comes with that. So, say for example, the laws change pretty often, and we need to have some talent that is dedicated to looking out for our associations on our behalf. You know, and so if you don't have the temperament, you don't have the time, then that's one of the areas where you would want to evaluate looking at outside talent, right? I believe in an a la carte approach. So if that's something you need, work out a relationship with a strategic partner. Also, you're going to need some help with changes in the laws. Again, you can delegate responsibility, but you can never delegate accountability. So don't hand off that responsibility and not stay abreast of it and make sure you're constantly educating yourself. Anthony, want to answer?
Well, yeah, I do, but I'll let him answer.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I was not here this morning, and so who are the folks on the panel?
Oh, sorry.
I apologize, man. I thought I was like a J-Lo or something. I'm sorry. My name is Carell Driscoll, and I'm a part of the Georgia HOA Alliance, and I'm also on the board of directors for my community, Regency Oaks Neighborhood Association.
Monique Sheffield, Sheffield Realty Group, and I am the past president of my community association.
And I'm Wayman Cumberlander. I'm the owner of Association Management Professionals, property management company.
I apologize, man. We're just so tacky.
No. Well, just to add on to managing, you know, as Carell mentioned, there's a lot to managing an HOA, being a self-managed HOA. The HOA that I managed, we have 144 homes. So we're dealing with 144 different personalities, and assuming there are 2 people per household, well, you can do the math. So there are a lot of different personalities that you're dealing with. And, you know, as Arrington mentioned earlier, we're neighbors first. So a lot of times your neighbors, even if you're in a position of leadership and authority being on the board, your neighbor is not going to see you more than just their neighbor. The respect is oftentimes not there. So to Carell's point, it's a great idea to maybe outsource some responsibilities. So for example, for the board that I was on, we have a property management company that we employ to enforce the covenants. So that company's responsibility is on a monthly basis to visit each of the homes and make a note of those homeowners that are in violation. The property management company would be responsible for sending out correspondence and things of the like. So we have that person doing that. And obviously you have the board whose responsibility is pretty much everything else, because we did the financing, the treasury, and all of that other stuff. Now, what's equally as important in managing your HOA is managing the members on the board. Because again, people have different personalities. Now, what I think is important, because for the most part, as far as I know, those positions are all volunteer positions. So you're not going to get the same zeal and love for it, unless you're Carell, for doing it for free that you would obviously if someone is paid. So if you are on the board, particularly if you are the president, my advice to you would be, before a person comes on the board, because people have motivations for all different reasons. A person want to put up a fence, so they want to get on the board and think that all of a sudden now they're going to get this fence. So, you know, you obviously want to vet people. You can't just be on the board because you want to be on the board. So, you know, as the president, it's a good idea to find out how much time they can dedicate. Look, can you be available for the meetings? How frequently or how quickly can you respond to a request or to an email? If that person can offer a great deal of, I guess, production in terms of getting things done, but they may not be that accessible, going in, you know that. So as the president, you can really minimize your frustration. So it's not just managing the HOA, so to speak, but it's also managing the board members on the HOA. We are charged monthly. Her question is there a charge to pay the property management company? The answer is yes. We pay a monthly charge, and for whatever correspondence is sent out, we pay for the materials to send it, the paper, the envelopes, and the stamps.
So let's, okay, so I want to make sure everybody get an opportunity to ask a question. I'm sorry, can you speak just a little bit?
His question is, what does the fees run? I'm assuming you mean for the property management fee. It varies, but for the company that we use, they charge $350 per month. Yeah.
So how's that derived?
The charges vary. Of course, it's going to depend on the service. You have full
Right.
service, of course, you have accounting, you have what we call accounting plus. That's accounting plus inspections. Accounting normally starts for a smaller HOA, smaller condo, around $300 per month. And just depending on the size of your budget, that's going to depend on the cost of your accounting. Again, the inspections are normally anywhere from $250 to $300 a month. The bulk of the cost in a management contract is the time your manager spends on your property, coming to board meetings, whether they be monthly, quarterly, annual meetings. That's the bulk of the time, and of course, you know, answering calls from homeowners.
Budgeting, right? You mentioned budgeting. You know, many people complain about their HOA dues. And what you have to take into account is that your board members have to establish a budget based on the common areas, things that many of the homeowners are jointly responsible for. You're sharing in those expenses. So in my community, we have a huge clubhouse. We have pool, we have tennis, we have a tennis team, we have basketball. Look, we have a slide that requires that we have $1 million policy for our pool. So we're looking at pool maintenance. We're looking at certifications every year. Then we're looking at the clubhouse has to be maintained. There's electricity, there's water, there's landscaping. All of those things have to be taken into account when we establish a budget. Also important is the costs for delivery of those services. So that's why in some cases you may move into your community and your dues started out at $450, $500, and then next thing you know it starts to scale, right? Growing by a certain percentage. And there are various reasons why that could happen. You could have recently, you know, got sued, didn't have insurance, and you had to pay $100,000 out of from the community to the litigant. Well, that could be a special assessment, or they can increase your dues. I'm saying all of that to say is if you pay attention to your budget, you would wrap your head around what is being paid for by that aggregated or collected amount of dues. Because that's a big pain point for a lot of homeowners. Like to hire, you know, professional services such as a management company or a landscape company, there is a cost. Like today we have our community members are saying, hey, we want to be gated, or we need security. And the moment you say, well, you know, that may increase your dues by $50, $100, $200.
Who needs a gate? Yeah.
I mean, that changes. So I just wanted to make sure we level set. So everything costs except for the board members' volunteerism and a lot of your committee members. Because committee members can be paid. Board members can't. Right. Yes, sir. The question is, do most boards purchase directors and officers insurance, right? In our declaration, we are mandated to purchase insurance. What? Well, so the insurance would cover all of your amenities in your common area, and the board and directors and the committee members. So you should always have D&O insurance. And you know what? And there are gaps in the D&O insurance. There are maximum payouts for those insurance, and I would definitely recommend you start looking at some umbrella policies. You deal with this every day, right?
Right. Well, again, there's two things. Corral does a great job in his association, but he's not getting paid for it. So he puts a lot of time. So I said the reason you hire a management company calls it time. You can't get time back. It's very valuable. You can't get time back to spend with your family or take that trip you've always wanted to take because you're worried about the association. So that's where the management company comes in and handles the day-to-day. Again, also liability. I don't like to scare. A lot of people use scare tactics.
Tell the truth.
to get it in the front of the boards, but liability is very important. There are a lot of laws. It's not just your covenants. Your covenants are subject to the nonprofit code. If you're HOA, you could be subject to the POA. If you're condo, you're subject to Georgia condominium law. And the Georgia Real Estate Commission also adds more information on how to run your association. They list out the business judgment rule. If you're sued by a homeowner for something you did as a board member, they want to know that you use good faith, that you use common sense. Did you make that decision in the best interest of the community or just your best interest? If you fail to follow the business judgment rule, your D&O policy you mentioned is not going to cover you.
Okay.
So one thing a management company can do is work with the insurance agents to make sure you have the proper D&O coverage. I mean, if some of you are interested, I am not advertising this company, and I'll give it to you later, but they have filled every gap that has come about on being sued by someone. In previous years, the developer board was not covered by D&O. Now they are with this particular company. So if the developer board is sued, they will also cover them. But again, you need to sit down with your board if you're self-managed and talk about some of the possibilities of getting sued by a homeowner. And if you are sued, do you have the proper directors and officer liability coverage? Again, if you don't make those decisions in the best interest of the community, it's gonna go on your personal, you're gonna get sued personally.
Yeah, that's like piercing the corporate veil.
I would.
Yep.
I would.
Yep, so if I, since I've currently been in litigation and look like I may go in some additional litigation, I am being personally sued based on some communications that went out to the community. As the president is responsible for messaging and communicating with the masses. Now, based on the law, my communication with the members is a protected communication. But again, jurors, and I hate that, hopefully you hadn't served on a jury, but you probably would understand what I'm about to say, are ignorant. They don't know the law, they're not allowed to research the law. That doesn't mean that because by law my speech is protected, that a jury will not rule in favor of the complaint, the plaintiffs. So, and I'm a firm believer now, you gotta dot your I's, cross your T's. I don't really have side conversations off the records. I mean, my whole dynamics of engaging my community members have changed because of my role on the board. And I've always tried to communicate, there's two sides of me at least. There's Correll, the neighbor, who wants to enjoy himself. And him and his family want to walk and have fun and go to the pool. That has been X'd since I become a member of the board. I can't even, if a member come up to me and say, hey, you see what I've done to my house? And I say, that looks good. Well, I've just committed the association to approving those types of things. So you have to govern yourself accordingly. It's like being married to multiple women, not the Donald Trump style. know, trying to please everybody, sorry. Yes, sir.
Would that cost of insurance, would that be a legitimate expense of the association, or would that be a personal expense?
Oh, that's a cost of the association. In fact, and I'll let you out this. In fact, I would recommend, if you're a board member, I would allocate the budget to cover your umbrella policy. I would definitely push for the association to cover that umbrella policy insurance. Board member. Yes, you can do that. That's an expense. That's an incurred expense for the board member on behalf of the association. It's an incurred expense.
You have to insure the board itself, well, the HOA itself.
Okay?
The board itself.
DNO, yep.
Then you've got the person who comes out to cover you, the house, the drive, and.
Oh, okay, so I'm talking about umbrella, okay.
If you want to put a private board, you will cover that as a supplement.
So his question is in reference to the umbrella policy, which could cover me in many different aspects. Right. Right. Okay, that's fine. So and I've thought long and hard about this. If my reason for going out and obtaining an umbrella policy is to protect me and my family from areas that are not covered by that insurance, it's an incurred expense of myself, as a board member, and any incurred expense can be refunded by the association. Now, will somebody try to challenge me? Fine, let them. I guarantee you that that's an incurred expense. Otherwise, I wouldn't have went out and got an umbrella policy. Right, I'm sorry, yes, sir.
Am I correct in understanding that board members should be indemnified? That gets
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes, it's in the article of incorporation. That's why we ask you all to look at all of your governing documents. Again, you spend more time there. You've been under fire. Yeah, I know you stayed under fire. See, folks, when you become a member of a nonprofit board, period, you have exposed yourself to additional possibilities of litigation. So when I joined my board, I exposed myself to about nearly 500 people being able to sue me and my family. That is a lot of risk, lots of risk. And my umbrella policy would be more expensive because of that fact, which is an incurred expense on my part. Okay. Thank you. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. I had him. Can I come back? Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yes, I'm a self-managing HOA. As a rule, over the last 8 years, I've asked my board members to have umbrella insurance. I've never considered paying for it because I thought that would be a conflict of interest.
No, you're not. Okay.
Would that be construed as being payment for services?
Well, it's an incurred expense.
I hear you now.
Yeah. That's what you have to pay attention
I have to
to.
go research that.
No, I know it's in my governing documents that our board members cannot be paid, but we can be reimbursed for incurred expenses.
That includes the other issue in terms of being able to cover all the expenses for the homeowner association. If I do that, there's something to drop off my line item in terms of managing the payment. Or I have to increase dues, and I have to leave the country. Believe me.
You ain't making it out the country. Hey, I told you, if they ever want to catch
We go
somebody with
him
child
and then
support,
we'll
send
grab
that
you.
HOA.
Go ahead, sir.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
You said one of the things we need to keep up with is changing the law. Is that something the HOA, which your organization, HOA Alliance?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. The question is in reference to staying abreast of changes in the law. And so that is a service that we're looking to offer, amongst other things. And we will partner up with, management company, attorney firm to help us navigate that. I know Community Association Institute, they do a good job and they do it for free. So it's caionline.org. And so a lot of times when they release that on an annual basis, changes in the laws, we take those, we peruse them, and of course we share them out. That's one of the challenges of being self-managed.
What was the name of that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
CAI.
Online.org, yes.
Who pays the fees for the HOA Alliance?
So, that's a great question. So, what we have done is, we've set up two ways that can be done. The community is the preferred way, because when the community, your association pays that fee, it covers all of the members
Of the association or the board?
of the association. And we also have the ability for individuals to go out and become members. And the reason why we had to do that, because there are some associations that think that they want to operate in isolation, which our tagline is to avoid management in isolation, because again, that's how, you get caught with your pants down. And that comes to mind with one community that ended up having to file bankruptcy because they had a lot of infighting. Bad contracts were signed. If there was some type of networking, right, then that could have been avoided. Right, even joining, working with CAI, they could have been around some of their peers.
Hold on, the woman, yeah, and then we'll come to you.
I live in a complex that does have an HOA board. I don't know whether they have that umbrella of insurance, but you're saying that I, as a home in that complex, have an umbrella policy as well.
And in reference to working on the board,
No, just, no. So it would have to be a board member that had that umbrella policy, is that what you're saying?
As it relates to board issues.
right, board services.
Issues, yeah.
Okay, so you said that would be the expense of the HOA, so that would show up on our P&L that we receive.
It should.
Yes, it should.
As an item that would say just insurance or HOA insurance.
It depends on how they label it, right? Or categorize it.
What if I assume that it's labeled differently and it's kind of hidden under there? I can't prove that because we don't have enough meetings to make them accountable.
Okay,
And that's the avenue that we
Okay.
would like to go forward in the future.
okay, so we addressed that a little bit earlier. You're entitled to all of the records. I'm sorry, no, I'm not saying that you shouldn't ask the question, I'm sorry. What I'm saying is you have a right to any of those records. If you want to see backups to any of those entries that are in I like a general ledger, right? Because the general ledger is going to tell me all of the transactions, expenses, revenues, and you should be able to give details. So I don't know if I would necessarily say that they are hidden. It's just that they probably just categorize it under insurance, right?
Right.
And I don't want you all to think that board members want to be deceitful because they're in a position working around the money. I want you to take a look at it from the perspective is that, look, I want to do my due diligence as a resident of this community, and I want to ensure that I have my head wrapped around where my money is being spent. So that's okay. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. I'll get you next.
This goes back to the question. You mentioned, is the president of liability and other board members?
Oh, that's a great question. The question is, does the president, as an officer, have more of a liability?
You mentioned you were in that situation. Is that individually or your board?
Well, so from a board, each individual board member has the same level of exposure. The president has certain duties that afford him or her to be the speaker or the representation for the board. So communications may go out and I have to generate that communication. And it goes out, and what if a member or two or three or four don't like that message, and they may think it's an attack on them personally? Well, that's a slander lawsuit. So they're more prone to sue me as the president versus other board members who are not the voice of the board. And that was my intentions.
But the weight is typically the same.
Yeah, the weight is the
typically
same.
the
Yes, yes, sir, I'm sorry.
I don't believe the umbrella policy, which I have as a homeowner and a car owner, would cover me in the capacity of the board member. And
I think he would have to have that included, and that's an additional expense.
Have to add it.
I would not assume that my individual policy would cover me for that. I would want the association to have done that in place for the officers of the board, and they should.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't anything somebody's getting paid to do.
Right.
You should protect them.
I mean, the
Right.
directors and officers liability policy will cover you, but there's instances where you need additional coverage. For example, you could have a policy, you could have a gap in that policy, and don't always expect that if you have Nationwide, State Farm, and I'm not picking on them, just because you have a directors and officers policy through them, that's going to cover everything. You as a board, you have to look at that policy and make sure you are covered. And if you're not covered, see, can you add that coverages that are not in there, or find another policy that's going to cover you?
Right. And
So, so it never gets to your umbrella policy.
And again, I'm speaking from tales from the trenches. When the association got sued, and then, of course, I got sued personally, I got this letter from the insurance company saying, okay, yeah, you covered unless otherwise proven differently. So, you know, to me, that was like, wait a minute. Are you telling me that somebody can come out and be upset with me and attach something to my assets? You know, I'm not trying to drag my family into a dispute, because there are some people who have a significant amount of money living in these communities with you, and they just be looking for the drama. They troll and look for drama.
And
You have a question?
again, quickly,
Oh.
I'm sorry,
We'll get you.
quickly on that, if you are self-managed property, talk to your insurance agent about your D&O policy. And if you have a homeowner who threatens to sue you, report that to your insurance agent. They're not necessarily going to file a claim, but they just put the insurance company on notice that there's a possibility of a claim. Because if you don't tell the agent that someone is threatening to sue you, and then 6 months later down the road, they sue you, the carrier can choose whether they will cover that claim or not. Because they want to get a head start on that and already be working to see, they're looking at your coverages, seeing what they can do to better serve you if the legal defense comes about.
Yes, ma'am.
We have different committees that work under the board. How does the board, I mean, how does insurance cover those committees? So sometimes they're not on the board, they're just other neighbors just operating. And sometimes they try to operate, not really going along with what the board has been asking them to do.
Okay. Yep,
So
yep.
how does that cover them?
Well, that's, I get you, we got you in the back next, okay?
It's on insurance.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have one later.
yeah.
Yeah, but see, but part of managing an association is to make sure you have appropriate coverage, and her question is an awesome question, because the declarant had D&O for their officers, but they didn't cover the committee members. And, you know, that's your responsibility to ask. And I'll be honest with you, I would not work for any nonprofit that doesn't have any insurance coverage for me. Because again, you're working for free, and then you can end up in some type of litigation. Now, what if a claim is made? And I think I spoke to you all about this earlier. This is another reason why minutes of a meeting is very, very important, even committee members. Because that will be the first thing that the insurance company asks us for, to prove that you were and are an active member of a committee. So, you know, I had some neighbors who were really upset with me because I was really stringent about turning in those minutes. And that's one of the major reasons why. So hopefully that answers your question. Let me get back here and then we'll come back up.
One of the things last month that I think that all homeowners association need to be aware of is under HUD Fair Housing, as of October the 14th, you can be liable for harassment that goes on between neighbors, depending on what you do. So you might want to get one of the fair housing companies, Metro or someone to come out and do classes for you on that, because you're going to be seeing a lot of lawsuits.
Yeah, so essentially what she stated is that HUD has just made some changes to the laws or the rules. And now an association can be held liable for neighbors who harass other neighbors, right? So if someone is complaining about harassment from a neighbor, now we have to intervene. No, that's a change. That's a more recent change within the last, what, 2-3 months?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay, you got it?
Okay.
HUD can't pass laws. They can create regulations to enforce laws, but they can't pass laws.
Well, it's a rule, and really, it is a law. I'll know what, I'll make sure I share with everybody on the list. I'm glad you brought that up, because it was sent to me, and when I took a look at it, I was like, holy crap, because we stay out of disputes between neighbors, you know, to avoid the sense or the view of choosing sides. Now, we have to address that. So these are some of the things that we've talked about. Yes, HOAs can be held liable. I would have to send it to you, but if you do a search on HUD regulation changes, neighbor harassment, but I'll get it out to the entire list. It won't be restricted to you. So let me just respond to this, and then I'll make sure we'll get your other question. What that does for the board is it actually puts us in the middle of neighbors. I mean, and let's face some facts. There are some neighbors that will use or leverage the association to harass other neighbors. And so we may even have to start getting into mediation, hiring mediation services, which means that we may have to increase dues.
Yeah. And on my end, that is a very interesting regulation.
Yes, it is.
On how that's going to be enforced. In my opinion, I'm not an attorney. I think if you have the opportunity to speak to an attorney about it, do so. I am, because it is new and it just came out. Personally, I think it was meant more for apartments and condominiums, because you have such a close living area. In a HOA, I'm curious how they can enforce on the HOA board or the management company, how you can police people who own properties in a fee simple state. How can I tell you what you can do with your land, your property? Because you're responsible for everything on that property, insurance, maintenance, everything. Now, condo is not divided, it's different. So that's my take on it. I haven't spoken to an attorney about it yet. I will, because I'm curious.
It makes me nervous.
And then sometimes until there's a court case, you won't really know.
Again, if I may, remember, it's not about being right or wrong. It's the cost to litigate.
Right.
Let me get him, and then
That's true.
Let me make sure I understand. If I've got a neighbor who likes loud Saturday night parties, and they play loud music and have big crowds coming in, and some other neighbors say, that's harassment, or that's something that I don't want. Are you saying that the homeowners association then is responsible for correcting that problem?
I don't know if it would be specifically like that, but the short answer is yes. We will have to address it now. Can we
According to
honestly-
that rule,
Oh, you got it? You got it?
no, I mean, I'm trying to research it, but
So according to that rule, we have to run some type of intervention. So maybe sending out letters, right? The first letter would be more of a warning. The second letter would say, hey, you have 10 days to abate. The third letter would say, okay, this is your last opportunity. And then we stop there. That may be enough. I don't know. We have to find out. We have to have that interpreted.
And one of the things as a management company is we have staff meetings monthly, and we have an attorney sometimes come and speak on different laws and how they affect the condo or the HOAs. And the HOA attorneys have said that the association cannot enforce nuisance. They haven't won in court. And as far as, I think it was last year, we had an attorney come, and there was an issue with smoking in a condominium. And the smoke was coming from one unit to the next. And the attorney said the association did not have the authority to enforce that. The homeowner had to enforce that. So that's a contradictory with this new FHA regulation that we have to get more clarification on.
Yep. And if I may add, too, from an HOA perspective, you know, that's a very sensitive area, because, you know, you could be sued just for saying that, you know, you're treating them differently than others. So, you know, now you see why we want umbrella policies.
I'm scared. Seems so weird, just existed board meetings are, if they even still exist, or where they
The Georgia Secretary of State office can
where I
tell
go.
you that. Yeah.
So they would, we would have to go back to ground zero and find out.
No, you can go online and find that record. Just search, do a company search. A company search on the Secretary of State website and put in your community name. I'm sorry? No, you need to look up your association, your company, your organization.
Name association, so right now with the floor.
Well, so if I can, I really want to address that, because if you're running headless, that don't mean you can't be sued. In fact, that would make me nervous. Well, let me tell you why. First of all, I would want to go out and do a search on the Secretary of State website and identify who were the officers. Because that's what you're going to get. You're going to find out who's the president, all of the officers. And then you need to find out who is your, when you get your mail, what do you call it?
Registered agent.
Registered agent. That's what makes me nervous, because if I'm living in your community and I wanted to sue, it's going to that registered agent. And if that registered agent doesn't respond, I get a default judgment. And then all of the homeowners will have to pay that bill. So if I were you, I would do my due diligence to identify the state of my organization, because it is a business and you will be treated as such in court, and you're held to a higher standard.
My concern is that it's so dysfunctional in regards to,
You plan on leaving?
no, I'm not going to.
There you go. We got our first board member right there. We have our first board member right there. I would have to step up to the plate if I don't plan on moving.
And again, you have the right to call a meeting based on your bylaws. You have a right to call a meeting, but you have to have the proper percentage to do that, but at least try to do that, to talk to the other homeowners in a formal setting.
So we'll speak to that, but honestly, I wouldn't say it. Yes, ma'am. Then I-
You stated that the minutes should be kept just in case the insurance
You need to keep minutes, period.
Well, our board doesn't keep minutes unless there is a quorum. If there is no quorum,
Well, that's a meeting. That's a meeting. That's a meeting. A quorum when you have your quorum, that represents your meeting.
that's right. So
Okay.
if there's less than a quorum, then they've had less than a quorum in the last 5 years, there's no record of any meeting.
Right.
They have not had a quorum, but they've done the things that they wanted to do.
So they can't
That's
say
right. That is correct. If you
You're not
don't-
transacting business.
Right.
You're not transacting any business here.
Right.
See, folks, don't allow this to run dormant, right? I know you're busy. I know you're working. I know you all are in flux. Look, if you haven't been paying dues for years because your association is not up and running, I've heard some of the horror stories where when the market tanked, the developers left, nobody was collecting dues. They came back after the market started to come back, and then everybody got sued. And guess what? You owe the money.
So dissolve association.
That's something you can try. You do have a clause in your declaration that speaks to dissolving that association, but I know one of the starting points is for the board to draft up the resolution. That's what I'm saying. There you go. Yes, sir. Sorry. Yes, sir.
Yes, I have.
Excuse me, everybody. Yes.
I have two questions. First question is there a repository of data as to where or what the associations are, or the number of associations in the Atlanta area or even the state of Georgia? Does anybody have that record?
So that's an awesome question. The question is in reference to who is collecting information on all of the communities, whether they're civic, formal community association, condos, etc. You know, we have started to do that. We have started to aggregate that actual information. You can go and look on the Secretary of State website, but not everyone will have neighborhood or association in their name. So we've started collecting that information. We've had a hard time getting it from the county. I've recently submitted an open records request to Fulton County to identify all of the communities in unincorporated South Fulton. So far, I've come up with 400, and we're still going. So I want to say no, and then I want to say yes, but they're not sharing it with us.
Thank you.
Is there any way that you can, how can you or someone like myself get that data from what you're collecting so far?
How can you get that data from me? And well, so we got to be very protective about that data. Like, say, for example, if you wanted to, say, if this guy here as a company wanted to send out some information from the membership that we've amassed over the last 3 years, we wouldn't necessarily hand it over to you, but we would actually send out something on your behalf as long as it's, it's appropriate material.
All right, my final question is this. In a situation where the ballpark is still in control of the community, can they do that in perpetuity? For example, you have a developer who started a project 10 years ago. The recession hit. They suspended building. Then they come back in and started building again. The documents say they doesn't really address when they can turn the community over to the homeowners. So the question is, can a developer who's building a community continue to exert control of that community in perpetuity?
Wow, that's all you want ever.
Are you in a D.R. Horton community?
I'm sorry?
Are you in a D.R. Horton community? What?
No.
Oh, it's not.
They rate them.
But in a HOA, the developer can do that. They can amend the covenants, so you may want to check the clerk records to see if there was an amendment to the covenants to extend the amount of time they had to continue the bill and not turn the association over.
Yeah, I would definitely hold them to the fire on that. I would definitely go
But
and
it
look at what's recorded to the
Yeah,
plat.
it should be
I'm sorry.
something recorded.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, that's disturbing to me because generally every declaration that I've read had some type of expiration period or condition. I would love to see yours.
But I've heard in at least 2 cases where D.R. Horton has extended the time before they have to transition because they're continually building.
And so, and if I
So
may
it
add,
is.
in my community, we didn't even meet the condition. When we started putting pressure on them about doing the right thing, they wanted to leave. They wanted to leave. And they did, and that's how we ended up taking over our community to run. Now, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying do your due diligence because as a resident, you have a personal interest in the success of your community. If that community fails, guess what's going to happen to all of the homes in that community? Your values will drop. And so you have to protect your personal interests or sale. I'm just telling you. But last question, because I know they're finished over.
I'm the last one.
Yes.
In terms of a
Make it good.
In terms of a registered agent, since I'm a self-managed HOA 31 home, who would be a good candidate for a registered agent besides myself?
Your attorney
Your attorney.
or a management company. Well, you know what, that could be a service you can outsource to a management company.
Yeah.
Well, that's what, if I live in hotel, you talk about property value, declining, and all that.
Well, yeah, there are so many different moving components in the community. If you would have talked to me 3 years ago when I first got started, I blamed everything on the management company. I blamed 9/11 on the management company. I blamed World War II on the management company. I really just wasn't all about the management company. But as I've grown and learned more and more about managing and operating an effective association, there are multiple components there. I blame it more so on the board members who go out and hire the talent and then just don't do their job. They just want their name, they just want it on their resume. I'm on the board, right? So I can no longer blame it on you. I apologize.
It is sometimes us. It is sometimes us. You have to find the right one. I will
You gotta
say.
find the right one.
You gotta
Well,
find the right
before
one.
we wrap up, I just want to kind of quickly touch on the point that was made earlier about the harassment and the HOA being involved. So I had a chance to look online, but before I share what I know, I'm going to put a disclaimer out there. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an attorney spokesperson, and I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm just sharing information. Well, basically, for those who just joined us, a point was brought up earlier that there was a HUD rule, Housing and Urban Development Rule, that recently passed that made the HOA responsible for harassment between neighbors. Well, from what I found online in my research, that speaks primarily to apartments, which I believe you alluded to. Again, I still encourage you to do your research, but it basically piggybacks on the fair housing laws in the protected class. So in essence, you cannot, well, you shouldn't anyway, but you cannot harass people based on the protected class or for quid pro quo, so you can't have something or harass a person for something in exchange. So that's the type of harassment that the rule includes. But I still encourage you to do your research.
So we haven't had any lawsuits on it yet. So,
Her question is, was I speaking about the new HUD rule? And the answer is yes. You can just Google it and just Google HUD's regulation for discriminatory housing practices.
and that's a real one there, because that.
And just include harassment in that, and it should pull up several links for you to research.
Did they define harassment in there?
Pardon?
Did they define harassment?
His question is, was harassment defined? It didn't have a definition, so to speak, for harassment, other than the quid pro quo. So again, just do your research on it. But it's not like a bulleted list of what defines harassment.
And usually when you find something that vague, then the courts would have to interpret that. So, you know,
But just Google and you can get all the information you need for right now.
Talk to your attorneys.
Yeah.
Is there a
The
distinct?
question is, when I said apartments, did I include condominiums? It can be, although from what I read, my inference is that it's really like public housing, although it has private housing as well, but it does not certainly seem to be, it does not certainly seem to be private ownership in a situation that most of us are probably in.
And in other words, we don't know what we don't know until those judges get to it and interpret and put out, case law. I'm telling you, I'm so tired of case law, I would never name my child Case.
We need to wrap up.
Okay, we're gonna wrap up. This is the last one, okay?
I just want to say, please look at it because apartments were always included.
Sure.
And people that rented were always included. Now the extension has come under to homeowners associations.
Yeah, but the clarification is specifically for harassment. The new rule is specifically for harassment.
And it sounds like it's probably going to branch over to condominium association. And the reason being is because a condominium association can allow FHA financing in a condominium. Some condominiums don't allow FHA financing, and some do. But those that allow FHA financing, they're probably going to be subject to that regulation, but not a HOA.
If I can add, this brings something to mind for me, now that you mentioned public housing, renters. Renters this could fall under the assumption that renters are being harassed by an association. So again, look folks, if you're not a board member, go back to your board members and say, hey, I need you to look into this and report back to the community. Because I can see where renters, because I mean, for most people who own homes, I'm just being honest, for some reason they act like renters don't belong. And that can be a form of harassment.